Picture a bowl. Just an ordinary wooden bowl, the kind you'd find in any kitchen. Rough-hewn, a little lopsided, dark from years of use. Now make it empty. Not empty like you forgot to fill it. Not empty like dinners in 5 minutes. Empty like it's been empty for 3 days and you've scraped the bottom so many times the wood is almost smooth. Empty like 2 of your children have stopped asking. Because asking didn't help yesterday and the day before and the day before that, and even children learn when hope is wasted energy. That's the bowl. Now put it in a cottage the size of your living room, except damp and cold, and shared with those children and a pig, and whatever vermin have decided that your walls are structurally interesting. Outside, fields. Beautiful, golden, recently harvested fields. Fields that belong to someone else. Fields where there is, if you know exactly where to look and exactly when to look and exactly how to move without being seen, enough food to keep your family alive through winter. If you know the rules, this is a story about the rules. England, 1795, the worst harvest in a generation. Bread at a price nobody can afford. Winter coming. Men away at war. There's a war on. Because there's always a war on. And this particular war involves a place called France that's currently busy executing its own nobility, and then executing everyone who objected to executing the nobility, so the whole continent is on fire. And somewhere in the middle of all of this, in a village whose name nobody outside the county has ever heard, you are a mother. 27 years old, though you look older. 3 children. A husband who left 4 months ago with a recruiting sergeant and a promise of regular pay, and you've received exactly 1 letter since, which mostly told you to pray, which was not helpful, and that bowl, that empty wooden bowl. So, I make these history stories, sleep stories they're called, which I find funny because I'm about to describe slow starvation in exquisite detail, and somehow that's supposed to send you gently off to dreamland. Maybe it works because misery on an empty stomach is exhausting just to witness. Maybe you're all just people who find the grinding machinery of historical poverty deeply soothing. I genuinely cannot explain it. Either way, I'm glad you're here. Get comfortable. Put something over your feet. Here we go. Your eyes open to grey. Not darkness, not quite. The curtain over the one window is just rough sacking, and the October morning is already seeping through it with that particular colourless light that means cold and damp and another day beginning. For a half-second there's nothing, just the grey light and the sound of someone breathing near you. Then the smell hits. Old smoke first. The fire went out sometime in the night, and the cottage holds the smell of it. Not the good smell of burning wood, but the grey dead smell of ash that's been cold for hours. Underneath that, the sour milk smell of the baby's blanket, which hasn't been properly washed in longer than you want to think about. The pig from the corner. She's a small, patient animal, and in truth you love her more than is sensible, because she eats almost anything and asks for almost nothing in return. But the smell of her is unavoidable, and underneath all of it, underneath the smoke and the sour cloth and the animal warmth of the pig, nothing. The absence of food smell, a kitchen that isn't cooking anything, a pot that holds nothing but a little cold water. Hunger doesn't smell like anything. That's the cruelest part. You keep expecting it to have a presence, a weight, a scent. Instead, it's just a hole where something should be. Welcome to Gloucestershire, England. October 1795. Your name is Mary Giles, née Cooper, wife of Thomas Giles, who is somewhere in Flanders with the 61st Regiment of Foot, or was the last time you heard. mother of William, who is 8, and Bess, who is 5, and the baby, John, 14 months old, who is currently investigating the pig with the focused scientific curiosity that 14-month-olds bring to everything. You arrived at this particular morning the way you arrive at all mornings lately, by surviving the night before. That's enough. That counts. The fire. You swing your legs off the straw pallet. The floor is hard-packed earth and cold. Not the vicious cold of deep winter yet, but October cold, the kind that finds your feet immediately and starts working its way up. Your stockings are somewhere. You find them by touch, sitting on the edge of the pallet and pulling them on before your feet properly register how cold the floor is. Method. Everything is method. You will discover that the village women who survive are not the strongest. Not even the most resourceful in any obvious sense. They are the most methodical. The ones who do the same things in the same order every day, who make decisions in advance so they don't have to make them under pressure, who know exactly what they have and exactly what they need and never, ever let those two numbers get confused with each other. Your mother taught you some of this. The rest you're learning right now, this autumn, this particular year that the harvest failed and the river ran too high, and the bread price went to shillings you don't have. The fire first. There's a little ash still warm in the grate. You can feel it before you touch it. Just a faint ghost of heat at your palm. You scrape the live ash carefully to one side. This is the art of firekeeping at the edge of poverty. You don't let it die if you can help it, because starting a fire costs tinder and patience, and sometimes you don't have enough of either. There's wood, not much. 3 pieces of split log, the end still whitish and fresh-smelling. William brought these yesterday from the edge of the groom's copse, which is, strictly speaking, not your copse to take wood from. It belongs to Mr. Bellamy, who owns the big farm outside the village, and whose gamekeeper walks those woods on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Yesterday was Wednesday. You know this because you know every single day of the week by what it means for where you can go and what you can take without getting your family into the kind of trouble that ends with the magistrate and the parish and a very unpleasant conversation about theft. You set the smallest piece of log over the warm ash, blow gently 4 times, 5, until a thin thread of smoke rises, and then a tiny flame, brave and unstable. There you are. The fire is the first victory of the day. You learn to treat each small victory as a real one. William is already awake. He's lying still on his pallet, but his eyes are open, watching you. Ma'am. Morning. Is there porridge? You look at him. He's 8 years old and he already knows the answer. He asks anyway, the way people ask questions when they want the ritual of asking more than they want an honest answer. I'm going to the fields today, you say, with your Auntie Nan. He absorbs this without changing his expression. William has a face that does very little, which he gets from his father, who had a way of hearing news, good, bad, indifferent, with the same steady expression as though he were considering it from a distance. You used to find it exasperating. You find it comforting now. Will there be something tonight? Yes, you say. You don't add if the fields yield anything, and if the weather holds, and if Bellamy's man isn't about, and if the hedgerows still have what I think they have. You just say yes. A mother's job, among many other things, is to be the wall between your children and the full force of what you know. Bess is harder to wake. She curls up like a hedgehog and makes a noise of protest when you pull the blanket back, and you have to physically fold her upright and hold her there until she's awake enough to stay that way. She blinks at you. Cold, she says. I know, come to the fire. The baby has gotten himself wedged partially under the pig, who is ignoring him with enormous dignity. You retrieve him. He smells terrible. He is happy. This is your morning. You didn't sleep well because you never sleep well. The same anxious half-wakefulness that keeps one ear open for the baby and one part of your brain running numbers. What's left? What's needed? What's possible? You run those numbers again while you heat what water you have and try to figure out what exactly you can give 3 children for breakfast when what you have in the cottage is approximately 1/4 of a small loaf of bread, which is hard, and some dried peas, which need soaking, which you did yesterday, so they're soaked, and a small piece of hard cheese, and whatever is left in the pot from last night, which is mostly water with the memory of turnip in it. This is the inventory of your life right now. Bread, hard cheese, soaked peas, turnip water, and outside, if you know where to look, the fields. The first rule of gleaning is that you know exactly what you're legally allowed to do, and you stay on the right side of that line even when the line has been moved recently by people who can afford to move it. Gleaning. This is the ancient rite. Ancient, not exaggerated. People have been doing this for thousands of years. Of the poor to walk through harvested fields and collect what the reapers left behind. The grain that fell from the sheaves, the ears of wheat or barley that scattered at the edges, the bits and pieces the scythe didn't reach. It's in the Bible, gleaning. Ruth gleaned in Boaz's fields. It's in Leviticus. You shall not reap your field to its very border, and you shall not gather the gleanings after your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner. The Old Testament 3,000 years ago recognized that a hungry person in a harvested field deserves something. 1795. England has a more complicated view of this. The common law gleaners had the right to enter harvested fields after the grain was carried, the key word being after, not before, not while the sheaves are being gathered and stacked. After the last load has rolled away, after the field is cleared of everything the farmer decided to take. Then, and only then, you can walk that field, and even then you walk it properly. You walk it in daylight. You don't come before the church bell has rung in the morning. You don't stay past the bell in the evening. And here's the thing nobody puts in writing, but every gleaning woman knows in her bones. You don't look like you're too good at it. A woman gleaning by herself, methodically working a field with practiced hands, collecting grain at a rate that suggests she actually knows what she's doing. That woman makes the farmers nervous. She's taking too much. She's organised. She might come back. You learn to look scattered, distracted, as though you're just walking and noticing the grain almost by accident. This is a performance. You have been giving this performance since you were 7 years old, when your mother first took you into the Harwood fields after the harvest and showed you how to pick grain from stubble without looking like you meant to. "Hold your apron like this," your mother said. The apron folded up into a kind of pouch, held at the corners. It looks casual. It holds an enormous amount of grain if you move steadily and know where the stubble is thick. Don't stare at the ground. Look up sometimes. Smile if anyone passes. What do I smile about? "Nice morning," your mother said. "A walk, the air." "We're cold and hungry." Smile anyway. That lesson is 20 years old and it still works. The second part of Rule 1 is knowing which fields you're allowed to enter and which you're not, and this changes every year as the landlords shift and fence and reorganise their holdings. The Enclosure Acts. This is the other thing happening to your village in 1795, alongside the harvest failure and the war, because the Georgian countryside is not content with just one catastrophe at a time. The Enclosure Acts are parliamentary decisions, and they have been passing them since the 1750s, accelerating now, that take land which was previously common land where anyone in the village could graze a cow, or cut turfs, or collect berries, or run geese, and formally enclose it, fence it, assign it to private ownership. This sounds like a legal technicality. It is not a legal technicality. The common land was how the village breathed. The small holders who couldn't afford large farms kept a cow or two on the commons, kept geese, kept the edge of poverty at a just survivable distance. The gleaning rights, the rights to collect wood, to dig peat, to gather fruit from hedgerows, all of it was interwoven with this understanding that certain land was for everyone. That understanding is being legally dismantled. Parcel by parcel, hedge by hedge, the common land shrinks. In your village, the South Common, 15 acres of rough grazing where 4 families kept cattle, was enclosed 3 years ago. There's a wall around it now. New wall, clean stone, completely impassable. On the other side, Mr. Bellamy's sheep. You knew those families. 2 of them left the village afterward. 1 to the workhouse. 1, they said, to Birmingham. Though what you do in Birmingham when you're a 60-year-old man who's kept cattle all your life, you cannot quite imagine. So Rule 1 in full, know your rights exactly, know the boundaries of those rights exactly, and accept that those boundaries are moving in one direction, and the direction is away from you. Nan is at your door before the second church bell. Your Auntie Nan is not your aunt. She is Anne Mercer, who lives 3 cottages down and whose husband died of fever 6 years ago, leaving her with 2 daughters who are now 12 and 14, and thus old enough to be useful. She is 51. She's possibly the most competent person you have ever met in your life. She's wearing her gleaning apron and carrying a basket, and she already has mud on her boots from wherever she's been this morning before she came here. The Cosley field, she says, without saying good morning. I went past at first light. Bellamy's men finished the wheat there yesterday. You're sure it was yesterday? The cart tracks are still fresh. Ground was soft enough. 2 carts, both north toward his barn. That field's done. You look at the sky. Clear, which is good. Cold enough that your breath fogs, which means the dew is still thick on the stubble. You'll want to go within the hour before it dries off and the grain is harder to spot. This is the thing about gleaning. The window is small. After the field is cleared and before the farmer turns his livestock in to eat the remaining stubble. A good farmer turns livestock in quickly, sometimes within a day. The animals eat everything. By the time they're done, the field is scraped, and any gleaner who arrives finds nothing but hoof-churned mud. Leave in a quarter hour, Nan says. I need to settle the children. I've got mine with me. She tilts her head. Her elder daughter, Margaret, appears from behind the doorpost. She's 12, solid-looking, with her mother's exact expression of brisk assessment. She can sit with yours, Nan says. Better 2 hands gleaning than 1. Margaret has the look of someone who has given up arguing with her mother and now simply executes whatever plan her mother has decided upon with quiet efficiency. You know this look because you are sometimes this look. An hour, you tell William, who is watching from the doorway. Maybe 2. You're in charge. William straightens slightly. Yes, ma'am. This is the other calculation. You cannot take the baby gleaning. You cannot. A 14-month-old in a harvested field, crawling towards stubble and chaff and the occasional sharp stone, is not survivable. And you've already used up enough of the universe's goodwill this year without asking for more. So every gleaning expedition is also a calculation about who watches whom. Margaret is reliable. William is 8 and has the steady temperament of a much older child. Bess is 5 and will attempt to either follow you or climb something inappropriate, so she needs to be given a specific consuming task. You put her in charge of the pig. You keep her, you say. She's not to go out. Tell her the outside is dangerous. She doesn't speak, Bess says. Pigs understand more than you think. Bess considers this seriously. All right. The pig, who is named Susan after no particular human Susan, watches all of this with the tranquil expression of an animal who has heard worse plans. You go. The road out of the village is mud, as all roads are mud in October, a particular kind of cold, wet mud that has worked its way into every rut and hollow and sits there waiting. You and Nan walk side by side, your boots sinking slightly with each step, the sound of the village fading behind you, the scratch of a broom, someone's dog, the smith's hammer already ringing from the far end. How bad is the Cosley field, you ask? Not the worst I've seen. They did it fast, his men, so there'll be waste. Hurried reapers always leave more. He won't put sheep in. His shepherd's been grazing the north field since Monday. He won't move them today. Nan adjusts her basket on her arm. We have until tomorrow morning, I think, maybe the day after. This is expert knowledge. Nan has been gleaning this land for 30 years. She knows Bellamy's routines the way she knows the weather. Not perfectly, not infallibly, but with enough accuracy to navigate by. The field opens before you as you crest the slight rise above the village. Cosley Field. Maybe 12 acres of wheat stubble. The cut stems are dull golden bronze, stretching to the far hedge. The wheat has been carried. You can see the flattened tracks in the mud where the carts came through, and what remains is the stubble short, bristly, ankle-high, and whatever the harvesters left behind. You stand at the edge and look at it. The light is low and clear this morning, the October sun slanting almost horizontal, and it does something useful in that light. It makes the remaining grain catch. Individual ears, fallen or missed, catch the light differently from the stubble around them, a little shinier, a little more golden. Your eyes, trained since childhood, start finding them immediately. There, and there, along the edge where the scythe missed the corner, and there, a cluster of 3 or 4 ears caught in the roots of a thistle. You can already feel the calculation running. How many of those, what weight, what that means in terms of loaves, what that means in terms of weeks. Let's do this properly. The stubble catches at your skirt immediately. This is unavoidable. Every gleaner walks out of a field with the hem of her skirt frayed and dotted with chaff and tiny broken stems, and every November you sit by the fire and mend the damage, and every October it happens again. You move to the far end of the field and start working back toward the gate. This is method. You don't want to trample what you haven't reached yet, and you don't want to start near the road where anyone passing can see exactly how much you're collecting. Your hands work automatically. Bend. Find an ear in the stubble. Your fingers feel for it as much as your eyes spot it, because you're looking ahead while your hands work the ground beside you. The ear comes away from the stem with a dry rustling sound, and you drop it into the fold of your apron without looking. Straighten. 3 steps forward. bend. The motion is constant. Bend, gather, straighten. Bend, gather, straighten. After 10 minutes, your lower back starts to make its opinions known. After 20, it's a steady ache. After an hour, it's a conversation you're having with your own spine that involves some very direct language. You don't stop. Nan is working a parallel line about 20 feet away. You can see her bent figure moving steadily, her hands quick and expert, her pace fractionally faster than yours because she's been doing this for 30 years and her hands know things her brain doesn't have to tell them anymore. "You're walking too straight," she calls. "What?" "Your row's too neat. Walk a bit like you're wandering." You look at your tracks in the stubble. Yes, a ruler-straight path through the field, obvious from 20 feet. You adjust your path, make it wander slightly, look more random. Nan nods. The performance of carelessness, even when no one is watching. You do it anyway because it becomes habit. And habit is what protects you on the days when someone is watching. An hour into the field, your apron is heavy. Not full, it's a big apron, but heavy enough to be satisfying, the grain pressing against your hands through the cloth, the familiar dusty dry smell of wheat chaff rising from it as you move. Nan comes over to look. "Good." She peers into the fold of your apron, pressing slightly with her finger. Maybe 3 pounds. 3 pounds of grain. Maybe a bit more. Hard to say without the threshing. She looks around the field. There's more along that eastern hedge. The corner was cut badly. I could see from the road. But we need to be careful. Why? Bellamy's man goes along the hedgerow on his morning rounds. He'll come back that way. She squints at the sun. Maybe an hour. Here is the thing about foraging rules in 1795. The gleaning right exists in law, but the law is enforced by whoever is standing in front of you, and a gamekeeper or farm bailiff who decides you're taking too much, or taking it at the wrong time, or generally being too effective at keeping yourself alive, can make your morning very difficult, not violent, usually not violent, but he can confiscate your grain. He can report you to Mr. Bellamy, who can instruct the overseer of the poor to note your family's name in the parish records as troublesome, and a family marked as troublesome gets less from the parish poor relief and more scrutiny from the magistrate. He can simply stand there and watch you, so that you can't work efficiently, can't collect anything without feeling his eyes on your hands. Some of them do this on purpose. The watching is the message. So you take the corner of the field, work it quickly with both your hands moving like you're not thinking about it, and retreat before the hedge road before the hour is up. 3.5 pounds of mixed wheat. Some barley from a patch near the east end that you hadn't expected. A handful of dried peas from what was apparently a corner where someone experimented with an additional crop. Nan weighs it in her hands, literally holds the whole bundle of apron up, gauges it, nods. 4 pounds about, maybe a touch more. She looks at you. Enough for your household? 3-4 days of bread if I stretch it. Mix it with the dried peas, and there's... She pauses. Looks at the sky. Come, I want to show you something. There is a hawthorn hedge along the northern edge of the Cosley field, old enough that the stems are as thick as your wrist at the base, and tangled past all reason into a wall of thorns and branches that goes on for perhaps a 1/4 mile. Nan stops in front of it and lets you look at it for a moment. Tell me what you see. This is how she teaches things. She asks you to look first. You find this irritating when she does it, and useful in retrospect. You look at the hedge. Dark red berries. Hawthorn berries. You know those. You've been eating them since childhood. Tart and mealy. A lot of them, actually. An unusual quantity. Higher up, where the hedge grows into more of a tree canopy, the dark clustered spheres of elderberries. No, wait, those are gone. Elder's fruit in late summer. But there, yes, some remaining elder stems, the berries mostly stripped by birds. Blackberries. You can see the canes woven through the hawthorn, the berries mostly past at this point in October, the remaining ones dark and soft. Hawthorn, you say. Blackberries, mostly done. Some sloe berries on the blackthorn, that dark section on the left. What else? You look harder. Crab apples, there the branch coming over the top, small, but... You move to look at the base of the hedge. Rosehips. A lot of rosehips. A lot of rosehips, Nan repeats. What are they worth? This is not a poetic question. She means, what can you make from rosehips, specifically, right now, that will help your family survive the next 3 months? Rosehip syrup. Dense, sweet, thick. You've made it before. Simmer the hips, strain out the seeds and the fine hairs inside. The hairs are important, you'll come back to that. Press through muslin, reduce until it coats the back of a spoon. The hips are full of something your body craves in winter, though nobody in 1795 has a word for it. They just know that children who get rosehip syrup through the cold months tend to come out the other side healthier than children who don't. The knowledge is older than the explanation. I can make syrup, you say. I have the pot. There's more than syrup, Nan says. She reaches into the hedge with her gloved hand. She's wearing thick leather gloves for this, which you note because you're not wearing gloves, and the hawthorn has already drawn 3 thin lines of blood across your right hand, and pulls out a branch loaded with the small, round, red hips. Rosehip tea, dried hips ground for baking. These seeds even. If you dry them and grind them carefully, they add body to flour. Not as much as acorn flour, but easier to find. Acorn flour, you say. This is new to you? Nan looks at you for a moment with the expression of someone realizing that the student hasn't covered the advanced curriculum yet. Come, she says, we have time. Let me show you the oak. The hedgerow extends along several fields. Not all Bellamy's land, which matters. The hedge itself belongs legally to whoever owns the field it borders, but the plants that grow at the base and the fruits that fall to the ground are considered, in customary law, more ambiguous. Key word, customary. This is a law that exists in practice and tradition, but not in the statute books, which makes it the most and least reliable kind of law simultaneously. Nobody has officially declared that a hedge bottom belongs to the woman walking by it. Nobody has officially declared that she can't have the berries. This grey space is where most of your foraging happens. The rule about hedgerows, Nan says, picking hawthorn berries as she walks, moving her hand through the thorns with a quick certainty that comes from long practice, is that you never strip the whole hedge. You take from every section, a little from each part, no bare patches. Why? Because a bare patch says someone's been working the hedge carefully. A random scattering looks like birds and wind. The moment someone sees a methodically stripped hedge, they start wondering whose method it was. The performance again, the appearance of randomness, even when every movement is deliberate. Also, she adds, because if you strip the whole section now, there's nothing there in November when you need it again. This is the other lesson. You're not just feeding your family today. You're managing a resource that needs to still be there next month. Every gleaner, every forager, every woman who has ever walked a hedgerow in winter knows this in her bones. Greedy today is hungry in December. You both work the hedge for 20 minutes. Your hands find their own rhythm, the quick check, the short snip of fingers, the drop into the basket. The hawthorn berries bruise easily and need to be placed gently, or the ones at the bottom of the basket become mush before you get them home. The sloes, those dark little spheres on the blackthorn, are different. Hard as stone right now, and mouth puckeringly bitter. But in 2 weeks, after the first hard frost has split their skin slightly and sweetened the flesh, sloes become something else. You can make sloe gin, if you have gin, which you don't. You can make sloe jelly. You can dry them. More usefully, you can boil sloes with water, and a little of whatever sweetness you have, strain them through cloth, and get a thick, tart liquid that keeps children's bowels regular through winter, which sounds unremarkable until you've lived through the alternative. Carry them now and process them later, Nan says. Freeze overnight if you have a cold enough corner. Your outhouse is cold enough? Yes. Freeze the sloes 2 nights. Softens them. Easier to process. You add them to the basket. The rosehips get their own section of the basket, separated from the sloes and hawthorn berries, because they need different processing, and mixing them up later is a specific kind of frustrating. Nan has been using the same basket for 30 years, and it has 3 separate cloth dividers sewn in, each stained differently with different fruits. The basket is a museum of every autumn this woman has survived. Now, she says, the oak. There's a large oak at the corner of 2 fields that has been there longer than anyone can remember. It's not on Bellamy's land precisely. It grows on the verge, that strip of grass between the field boundary and the lane, which is technically the parish road verge, which is technically everyone's and no one's. Under the oak, in the grass and the mud, thousands of acorns. Most people know that pigs eat acorns. The pannage season, when pigs were historically let into oak forest to eat fallen acorns and fatten for winter, is ancient enough that it's still in some old legal texts. Most people do not think to eat acorns themselves. This is where pride becomes dangerous. Acorn flour, Nan says. She picks up an acorn and holds it out to you. Round, tight in its little cap, brown and firm. This is food. This is flour with work. This is bread when wheat flour runs out. I know people do it, you say carefully. People have done it for 10,000 years, Nan says without irritation. The thing that stops you doing it now is that someone might see you and think. She pauses. What? What do you think they'll think? You don't want to say it. It sounds foolish, said out loud, but that it means you're really desperate, that you've sunk to eating something pigs eat. They'll think you're clever, Nan says. The stupid ones won't. The stupid ones will think what you think, which is that there's something shameful about it. Those families will be hungry in February. She starts gathering acorns into her apron pocket, quick and practised. The clever ones will think, there goes a woman who knows what she's doing. The method: you gather the acorns, the largest ones, the firmest ones. You leave the small and the soft. Small acorns aren't worth the processing time. Soft acorns may be starting to rot inside, and you're not giving your children rotten anything. Then, and this is the key step, the thing that makes acorns edible, the tannins. Raw acorns are bitter and will make you sick. They contain tannins, the same compounds that make strong tea astringent, but in quantities that will have you doubled over if you eat enough of them, untreated. To remove the tannins, you leach them out, crack the acorns, remove the inner meat, grind it coarsely, and then soak it in water. Change the water. Soak again. Change the water. This takes days, 2 days, 3 days, depending on the acorns. You taste the meal at intervals. When the bitterness is gone, when it tastes almost neutral, slightly nutty, slightly starchy, it's done. Then dry it. Then grind it finer. Then you have flour. Not wheat flour. It behaves differently, doesn't rise the way wheat does, makes a denser bread. But it is flour. It is calories. It is the difference between 4 days of bread from your gleaning and 7. You'll never make it the whole way through winter on gleaned wheat alone, Nan says, gathering acorns steadily. Not this year. The harvest failed too badly. Everyone is gleaning. The field's going to be stripped by the end of the week. Then what do? She looks at you. We already did the first thing. We got here early, before the field was stripped. We'll do the second thing, which is this. She gestures at the acorns. We'll do the third thing tomorrow, which is the mushroom field up behind the chapel, but only if the weather holds, because wet mushrooms rot before you get them home. We'll do the fourth thing, which is the parish. I'm not going to the parish. She stops, looks at you. You'll tell me, she says slowly, that pride is more important than your children being hungry. It's not pride, it's... You stop. Is it pride? Partly, but it's also strategy. The parish poor relief, the overseers of the poor, the vestry meetings, the humiliating assessment of your circumstances by men who sit behind tables and look at your children's shoes to decide if you're genuinely poor enough to deserve help. That process marks you. Once you're on the parish lists, you stay on them. Your name is written down. Your family is known to need help. And the things that come with being known to need help, the moral instruction, the conditions, the suggestion, sometimes the outright demand that your children be apprenticed out, sent to work, separated from you. William is 8. He's the age when parish overseers start looking at children and seeing labour. You are not sending William anywhere. It's not pride, you say again. It's that I don't want them near William. Nan is quiet for a moment. All right, she says. All right. Then we do this better. She says it without judgment, which is somehow harder to bear than if she'd argued. She just adjusts the plan, accounts for the constraint, keeps moving. This is the woman you want to become. There is a rule in mushroom foraging that predates every other rule, that overrides every other consideration, that exists above strategy and method and the performance of carelessness. Do not feed your children anything you're not certain about. This sounds obvious. It is not obvious at 3 a.m. when you're calculating whether the mushrooms drying in your larder are the ones Nan showed you 3 weeks ago, or whether they might be the other ones, the ones that look similar in dim light, the ones that will destroy your liver within 3 days and there is no cure. You're certain about a small number of things. Those things you collect. Everything else you leave alone, or you ask Nan, who will tell you with complete certainty, or will say, I don't know, leave it. And either answer is acceptable. The things you are certain about, field mushrooms, round white caps, pink then brown gills on the underside, a clean smell that's almost nutty. They grow in the meadows and pastures, in the grass where cattle have grazed. In a good autumn you can collect pounds of them in an hour. This autumn has been too wet for good mushrooms. Too much rain in August rotted most of them before they were worth picking. Puffballs, the large white spheres, smooth and firm, that appear in the grass. You've been eating these since childhood. Slice them open. The interior should be pure white and firm, like a very dense bread. Any tinge of purple or yellow inside means it's started to develop into something that won't feed you. Leave it. White and firm, it's food. seps, which your grandmother called penny buns. Brown cap, white to yellow tan underside, no gills but a spongy pore surface, strong earthy smell. They grow in woodlands, often near oak trees. You find them rarely, but when you find them they're valuable enough that you take them home carefully, wrapped in cloth to dry on a string near the fire, and use through winter to flavour whatever thin soup you're making. These three you know, absolutely. The ones you do not touch without Nan beside you. Everything else. Every mushroom that looks like it might be something edible. Every fungus on a fallen log. Everything white-gilled or ring-stemmed or growing in a fairy ring. Not because you're ignorant. Because ignorance and certainty look identical from the outside, and the cost of mistaking one for the other is your child's life. Today behind the chapel there is a small pasture that has been grazed by sheep all summer, and in pastures grazed by sheep, in the damp of October, field mushrooms grow in rings. You can see 3 rings from where you're standing at the gate. White caps in the grey-green grass catching the low morning light. You and Nan go through the gate, the chapel land technically, and you have had a quiet word with the Reverend's wife, who is a practical woman who understands that God's earth is for the feeding of his people, and work the rings methodically. The smell of them, cut fresh, is extraordinary. A dense, meaty woodland smell that is everything your body craves right now. Everything that says real food, protein, sustenance. You breathe it in deliberately. This is a scent you associate with good meals, with your mother's kitchen, with the memory of autumn before everything got harder. Your knife is small and sharp. You cut them at the base, not pull. Pulling disturbs the mycelium, the invisible web underground from which the mushrooms grow, and if you disturb it, you damage next year's harvest from this ring. Cut, not pull. Nan is watching your technique. Better, she says. You learned. 40 minutes in the pasture, 2 pounds of field mushrooms, none of them wrong, all of them solid and clean smelling. Some you'll cook tonight, some you'll dry on a string near the fire for winter. The string method, Nan says, threading a mushroom onto a needle and twine to demonstrate, is only for the ones that are completely dry when you pick them. These ones, she touches the gills of the nearest mushroom, feels the slight dampness there. These have moisture in them. If you string them and dry them quickly near the fire, they're fine. If you let them sit damp, they mould. And mouldy mushrooms are not as dangerous as some things, but are a waste of time and smell terrible and will make the children sick, yes. So tonight they get cooked. Tonight they get cooked. You go to Stroud on Thursday. Not every week. The walk is 4 miles each way, which is bearable in summer and difficult in October mud, and the cost of entry to the market, a halfpenny, feels significant right now. But Thursday's the big market day, and there are things you can sell and things you need to buy, and the arithmetic of this particular trip works out. What you're carrying, a small packet of dried rosehips wrapped in cloth, a basket with the mushrooms you haven't yet used from this week's foraging, dried to the point where they'll travel without damage. And something that is harder to describe as a product, your labour. There are women who set up at the edge of the Stroud market and offer processing work. Gleaned grain needs threshing, separating the grain from the chaff. The process involves a flail, repetitive physical labour, and a threshing floor. Most cottagers don't have a proper threshing floor. The women with grain can bring it to the women at the market edge, pay a small fee, use the communal setup, and leave with clean grain ready for milling. You've done this before. You know the price, You know the women, and this morning you also have a small additional amount of grain that Nan pressed on you yesterday, with the explanation that she has more than she needs right now and expects you to return the favour in some unspecified future emergency, which you understand is not a gift, but a bank deposit. The road to Stroud. 4 miles is not a long distance. In summer, in good shoes, in no hurry. 4 miles is a pleasant walk. In October, in shoes that have been resoled twice, and are thinking about a third time, in a cold that has settled properly into the air overnight, carrying a basket and a cloth bundle, with the sun not yet fully up. 4 miles is a commitment. You know the road, every rut in it, every section where the mud is deepest, every gate you can lean on to rest. Your arms. The road passes through 2 other villages, Brimscombe first, then the valley, then the climb up into the town, and by the time you pass Brimscombe you've found your walking pace, the rhythm that makes the distance manageable, the measured stride that doesn't wear you out. There are other women on the road. This is one of the things that surprises newcomers to poverty, how much company it involves. You're never alone on the road to market on a Thursday, because every woman in every village within 4 miles of Stroud is doing the same calculation you're doing, and many of them are making the same trip. You know some of them by name. You know others by sight. The woman from Bisley with the red kerchief. The sisters from Painswick who always walk in step. The very old woman who makes this trip every Thursday without apparent difficulty, with a basket of something on each arm, her pace unhurried and imperturbable. This road is a piece of living social infrastructure. It's how information moves. Walking beside someone for 3 miles you can learn which landlord has been good this year and which one has been extracting every last thing, which families are in trouble, which families have an extra pair of hands for hire, which gentleman's wife is looking for a temporary kitchen maid, which village has a dispute with its enclosure proceedings that might be worth knowing about. You hear, on the road to Stroud this Thursday morning, that the bread in the market town is at 2 shillings for a 4-pound loaf. This stops you walking. The woman who tells you, Martha Haynes from Brimscombe, a farmer's wife, not desperate but not comfortable, says it with a tone of flat disbelief. 2 shillings, she says again. That's impossible. I heard it from my husband, who heard it from his brother, who was in Stroud last Saturday. She adjusts her basket. The bakers are saying it's the grain price, and the grain price is the harvest and the roads, and she makes a gesture that takes in the war, the cold summer, the whole grinding weight of external circumstances. 2 shillings. You make a rapid, nauseating calculation. What you have, what you owe, what is available. The honest answer is 2 shilling for bread is not something your household can sustain. Not this winter. Not at the prices everything else is running at. You knew this in the abstract. You've known it since September. But hearing the number said out loud makes it specific and present in a way that the abstract knowledge isn't. 2 shillings. They're saying there might be trouble, Martha Haynes says, lowering her voice slightly. In town, at the market, people are... She glances around the road. People are not happy. Not happy. This is the most understated possible description of what happens when working people cannot afford to eat. When, you ask? Saturday, maybe. Could be sooner. She looks at you directly. Are you going to be there today? I have to be. I have grain to thresh. She nods. Her expression is neutral, but her eyes are not. She's telling you to be careful. She's telling you it might be more complicated than just the market today. Stay near the edge, she says. Don't get between the millers and... She stops. Just stay near the edge. The town hits you with smell first, the way all towns do. The tannery at the north end, sulphurous and thick. The dye works lower down, that particular sharp chemical smell of cloth dyeing that coats the back of your throat. And underneath both, the ordinary smell of a market. Animals, food being cooked or spoiling, mud trodden by hundreds of feet. People. The market is busy. Always busy on a Thursday, but this Thursday feels different. There's more noise than usual, voices at a higher pitch, the particular tension in a crowd where too many people have been worrying about the same thing for too many weeks. You go to the threshing setup first, practical first, everything practical first before the situation in the market clarifies itself. The threshing setup is in a yard off the main market street. 3 women with a proper threshing floor and flails, charging a penny for 3 pounds of grain and taking a percentage of the threshed output as additional payment. This seems extractive until you consider that you don't have a flail or a proper floor, and the alternative is hand-separating grain from chaff by rubbing it between your palms, which works but takes twice as long. The woman in charge is called Agnes Pond. She's 40-something, built like someone who has been using a flail for 20 years, with hands that look like they were carved from wood. Cooper's girl, she says when she sees you, your maiden name. You've been coming to Agnes since before you married. It's Giles now. I know. How's Thomas? Somewhere in Flanders. A pause. Agnes, who has 3 sons, 2 of whom are in the army, nods once. Nothing more needs saying. You hand over your grain. She weighs it with the practised press of her hands. About 8 pounds, she says. I'll take a pound in payment, and you take your place in line for the floor. The sound of the threshing floor is a specific rhythmic sound that belongs entirely to this moment in autumn. The hollow crack of the flail on the grain, the rustle of straw, the chaff rising in the cold air. It's a dusty business. By the time you're done, you have chaff in your hair and a faint wheeze in your chest from the dust, but you have 7 pounds of clean grain ready to take to the mill. The mill is 3 streets down, 1 penny to grind. You'll come out with something approaching 6 pounds of flour. Flour loses weight in grinding, always, which is at last an amount that means something solid. Standing in the mill queue, you hear the market noise change pitch. It starts as a murmur, not louder, but different in quality, the way a crowd sounds when it changes purpose. There are raised voices from the direction of the bread stalls. The woman ahead of you in the mill queue turns to look. Here it is, she says under her breath. You have a decision to make in the next 30 seconds. The street leading to the bread stalls is 15 feet away. From here you can see the edge of a growing crowd, people pouring from different directions toward the same point, the specific movement of a mass of people who have been waiting for something to tip and have just watched it tip. Your flour, not done yet. Agnes has your grain. If you leave now, you leave without it. Your practical mind runs the math immediately. 6 pounds of flour is not negotiable. You're not walking away from 6 pounds of flour. You stay in the queue, but you listen. The shout that started it was something about price. 2 words, a price, and a word that wasn't polite. And then several more voices at once, overlapping, and then a sound that is specifically the sound of a market stall being pushed, which is a wooden crack and scatter sound unlike any other. The baker. You know his name, Edward Hearn. He's been in Stroud for 20 years, has 2 stalls, lives on the good side of town. He's not a bad man exactly, but he's a man who's raised his prices 6 times since spring, each time blaming the grain merchants, each time with an expression of genuine helplessness that might be genuine or might be practiced, and nobody has any way to tell. Today, someone isn't asking him to explain his pricing anymore. There are about 30 women in front of his stall, and they're not there to buy bread. They're there to demand that he sell bread at a price they can afford. This is not technically legal. You can't compel a man to sell his goods at a loss. But the crowd doesn't care about technically legal right now. The crowd cares about 2 shillings a loaf when a woman's husband is in Flanders and her children haven't had a proper meal in a week. From the mill queue, you can see but not hear the specifics. You can see Hearn behind his stall, hands up in a placating gesture. You can see the woman at the front of the crowd. You don't know her name, she's not from your village. She's holding something, maybe a loaf, maybe empty hands, and she's speaking in a voice that carries without being a shout, which is somehow more alarming than shouting. This is too expensive, is what she's saying, more or less. You know it's too expensive. We know it's too expensive. Everyone here knows it. And the crowd around her agreeing. Not with words exactly, with presence, with weight. 30 women in a market, all of them making the same point by being in the same place. The miller's boy taps your shoulder. You're next, missus. You turn from the crowd and hand over your grain. The grinding takes 10 minutes. You wait for it, ears toward the bread stalls, listening to the pitch of the crowd. It escalates, and then it doesn't escalate further. This is what happens most times, and you know this from the times you've seen it before. The threat hangs in the air. Hearn reduces his price, not to what the crowd wants, but enough that the moment loses its peak, and the crowd disperses with a kind of relieved anger, not having gotten what they came for, but having made the point, having made him know they're watching, that they notice. Today, a constable appears, then 2 constables. They stand at the edge of the crowd without engaging, which is the experienced constable's approach to bread riots. You don't wade into a crowd of 30 angry women unless you're being paid enough to justify the resulting bruises. The price comes down a penny. Hearn announces it in a voice that is simultaneously apologetic and resentful. The crowd takes this. Buying continues. The air pressure drops. You receive your flour. You pay your penny. You tuck it under your arm, bundled in cloth, and you get off the main market street. Your heart is beating harder than it should be. You tell yourself, this is what happens when things are bad enough. You tell yourself, you are right to stay. The flour is in your arms. But you also think, that could have gone differently. That almost went differently. And whatever comes after differently, the master, the magistrate, the example, the arrest of that woman at the front of the crowd, the woman who doesn't know you but who said what you were thinking. You don't want to be near it when it happens. You find the edge, you stay on it, you start walking home. The afternoon is colder than the morning was. The sun is behind clouds now, and without it the temperature drops with a focus that feels personal. You can feel it at your collar and your wrists where skin is exposed. The flour is heavier than it should be after 4 miles of carrying it. Your arms ache from the particular position of carrying a bundled cloth against your body, and you shift it from one arm to the other at intervals, and neither arm is comfortable. You should feel better than you do. You have 7 pounds of gleaned wheat, cleaned and ground. Mushrooms enough for tonight and dried mushrooms for 3 or 4 subsequent meals. Hawthorn berries and sloes and rosehips, enough for processing this weekend. Acorns to leach, dried peas from the field corner. This is a good day's work. This is more than you started with. But you're also thinking about the woman at the front of the crowd. You don't know her name, you never learned it, and you're not likely to. She did what she did, stood in front of Edward Hearn and said, publicly, loudly, with 30 women behind her, "This is too expensive." Because she calculated, the same way you calculate everything, that the benefits outweighed the risks, that the price of bread was real and present and immediate, and the risk of standing up to a baker in a public market was abstract and future, and maybe manageable. Maybe she was right. Probably she was right. The price came down a penny. But you think, there will be a moment when it's not a penny, when the constables don't stand at the edge, when the magistrate takes names, and the women who are there in that moment will have done nothing different from what she did today. They'll just have done it on a different Thursday. You shift the flour to your other arm. The road passes through Brimscombe again. The light is fading. October afternoons fold quickly, the sun dropping behind the hills before 4 o'clock, and the familiar rut and stone of the road is getting harder to see. Your feet know it well enough to continue without full visibility. You've walked this road in the dark. There are things you know now that you didn't know a year ago. A year ago, Thomas was still here, and the harvest, while not good, was not catastrophic. You had worries. Everyone has worries. But the specific, mechanical, daily worry of what do I feed these children tomorrow was not yet the structure of your days. Now it is the structure of your days. And the strange thing, the thing that's hard to explain to someone who hasn't lived it, is that it's not only crushing, it's also clarifying. Everything unnecessary falls away. What's left is the essential: heat, water, food, keeping William and Bess and John alive through another winter. That's it. That's everything. Everything else is decoration. You pass the last gate before the village road, shift the flour back to your right arm and begin the final mile home. William is standing in the doorway when you come down the lane. He's been waiting. You can tell from his posture. Not the anxious waiting of a child who's frightened, but the watchful waiting of someone who's taken on a job and is doing it conscientiously. He straightens when he sees you. Bess ate the last bit of bread, he says. I told her not to, but she said she was hungry. She was hungry. I was hungry too. I know. You push through the door. The fire, which you banked low this morning, has been fed. William has fed it. The cottage is warmer than you left it. Good fire, you say. He stands a little straighter again. How is John? Asleep. He was angry for a bit around midday, but then he slept. Margaret, who's been sitting near the fire with her mending, looks up. She's knitting something with determined concentration, her needles clicking with a regularity that sounds like a tiny mechanical process. He was fine, she says. They all were. You put the flour down on the table. John is indeed asleep. You can hear him from the corner where his blanket is, and Bess is sitting next to the pig with the specific expression of someone who has had a very full afternoon. We talked, Bess tells you. Me and Susan. What did you talk about? Bess considers. About being warm, she says. You unpack everything. The flour, the mushrooms, the berries in the cloth bundles. You arrange it on the table and stand back and look at it, and you do what you've started doing since September. You count in your head what this is worth in days. Flour, 10 days, maybe 12 if you mix carefully. Mushrooms, 3 meals of substance or scattered through a week of soups. Berries, rosehip syrup, which is medicine not food strictly speaking, but medicine that will matter. Acorns still to process. This weekend's work yields perhaps 4 additional days. Dried peas, 2 days already soaking, 3 more days meals in them. You are, on this October Thursday, approximately 3 weeks from starvation. Maybe 4, if the weather is kind and the hedgerows hold and Bellamy's gamekeeper stays on his regular schedule and no one near you gets seriously ill. This is fine. 3 weeks is not tomorrow. 3 weeks is workable. The fire tonight burns with wood you can't entirely afford, but the cooking requires it. You cannot process rosehips without a proper simmer, and you cannot make the mushroom soup without heat, and cold food on a cold night does things to children's spirits that are harder to quantify than calories, but just as real. You start with the mushrooms. The knife is a small, slightly bent blade with a horn handle that you have been using for 3 years, and that will last 3 more if you keep it dry. You slice the mushrooms, thick slices, not thin, because thin mushrooms disappear into soup without giving you anything to chew, and the act of chewing matters more than nutrition textbooks will ever explain. It's the body believing it's been fed. It's the stomach receiving something solid. The onion. You have 1 onion, slightly soft at the neck, which you cut in half and add to the pot. The smell of frying onion in a pan is one of the most powerful things you know. It hits something deep in the body, some old signal, food is coming, warmth is coming, and you watch William's head come up from his corner like an animal scenting something good. Good. The pot is a medium iron pot, blackened from years of use, with a small crack in the handle that you've repaired twice with wire. It holds maybe 3 pints, enough for 4 people if you manage the portions. You add water, cold from the bucket you filled this morning, and the mushrooms and the onion, and a small hard piece of salt pork that has been living at the back of the shelf for 2 weeks, used and replaced, each time yielding flavour into whatever you're cooking. The pork itself at this point has given most of what it has, but it gives. Tonight we have proper soup, you announce. Not as a gift, as information. But the distinction is lost on Bess, who makes the face she makes at good news, which is a very specific face. While the soup comes to temperature, you start the rosehips. The rosehip processing requires both hands and full attention, because the inside of a rosehip contains small hard seeds surrounded by fine hairs that are an irritant. Eat them, and your throat and bowels will inform you of your mistake with considerable emphasis. Every cook who works with rosehips learns to strain them completely and then strain them again and then wonder if they've strained enough. You halve the hips, scoop out the seeds and their surrounding fluff with a wooden spoon, and put the flesh into a small pan with enough water to cover. This simmers for 20 minutes, until the flesh is completely soft, and then you press it through a cloth, an old piece of linen worn too thin for clothing, pressing and pressing until only dry pulp remains. What comes through the cloth is thick and orange red and sweet. You add the smallest bit of honey. You have a small jar, received from Mrs. Wicks at the end of summer, in exchange for helping with the harvest, now used only for medicinal purposes, and reduce it further. The smell is extraordinary. something between roses and apples and autumn itself. You put it in a small jar. It will keep for weeks. You'll give the children a spoonful a day in the worst of winter. The soup is done. You call William and Bess. William settles John on his lap with the practised ease of a child who has been helping with the baby his whole life. Bess sits cross-legged on her blanket. You serve the soup into the bowl, the ordinary lopsided wooden bowl, and watch them eat. This is the part of the day that you work backward from. Everything you did this morning, every early rising and cold field and aching back and careful performance of casual randomness, all of it was for this. 4 bowls of hot soup in a warm room. Bess burns her tongue and looks at you for sympathy, and you give her some. Sunday. The only day that follows different rules. The Reverend Warren gives his sermon. You're in the 3rd pew, all 3 children beside you in descending size, John asleep in your arms. And the sermon is about the parable of the loaves and fishes, which this autumn has a specific resonance that you suspect Reverend Warren intended. He catches your eye after the service. He's a small, precise man, recently arrived in this parish, who has the manner of someone who knows that his salary and his house and his comparative comfort exist within 50 feet of people who are genuinely struggling, and who has decided that this should mean something. Mrs. Giles, he says, a moment. He has a small package for you, wrapped in brown paper, tied with string. When you open it later, you'll find it contains 2 pounds of flour and a small piece of dried salt fish, and a note that says, "For the family's welfare, no reply needed." The handwriting is his wife's. You fold the note and put it in your pocket and don't say anything about it to anyone. After the service, William asks if they can go to the hill. The hill, Selsley Common, as everyone calls the broad, wind-scraped common land south of the village that has, so far, escaped enclosure, rises above the valley in a long, unbroken curve of rough grass and limestone outcrops, and at its top you can see everything. An hour, you say. Then back for dinner. You walk the 4 of you up the steep path, John on your hip and getting heavier with every step. Bess ahead making remarks about the wind. William behind you quietly attending to things. The common land. This is the thing that hasn't been taken yet. This particular stretch of hillside grazed by common sheep for centuries, owned by no one in particular. You feel it differently now than you did a year ago. Every patch of common land you walk across, you feel the precariousness of it. The way it could become someone's, the way it's becoming someone's in parish after parish up and down the country. The path opens at the top, and there it is, the valley below you, the full, wide, complicated valley, the Stroud valleys, cloth country, the mills visible in the valley bottom, their mill ponds catching the pale autumn light like mirrors, the river, narrow and dark from here, winding its way through the bottom of it all. Your village, there. You can see Bellamy's farm, the big fields around it, the costly field where you gleaned 3 days ago, now with a dark fringe of sheep along the far hedge, the chapel, the mill, the row of cottages where you live compressed into something small from here, and beyond the village more fields, more hedgerows, more of this land that is both your larder and your obstacle, that feeds you if you know how to ask it, that turns you away if you don't know the right questions. John has fallen asleep against your shoulder, which is the most reliable nap he's had all week. His weight is warm and solid and real. From up here the whole system is visible, the way it all connects, the fields to the hedgerows, to the market roads, to the mills, to the bread stalls, to the women walking on the Thursday road to Stroud. The way food moves from the earth to the table, and the way 100 small decisions and 100 small acts of knowledge and method and careful performance stand between one and the other. This is what you are managing, not just your household, not just your children. You're managing your position in a system that is larger than you and moving in ways you can't fully control. The harvest failed because the summer was cold and wet. The bread price rose because the grain merchant set it there. The enclosure continues because Parliament allows it, and powerful men want it. None of that is yours to fix. What is yours to fix? The acorn soaking in the pot at home, the rosehip syrup in the jar, the dried mushrooms on their string, the grain in the flour sack carefully tied against mice, your 7 pounds of flour and your 3 children, and your pig, and your cold cottage and your knowledge, all your knowledge, everything Nan has taught you and your mother before her, and the women on the Thursday Road who share information like currency, that is yours. Ma'am, Bess says. She's found a piece of limestone with a fossil in it, a small spiral thing pressed into the grey rock. She holds it up. Look. Very good, you say. She pockets it. The future amateur geologist, if the world has room for her. The future anything, if the world has room for her. William stands beside you and looks at the valley. Is it always going to be like this? He asks. He means the food, the difficulty. He's 8 years old, and he doesn't have words for the whole thing, but he has a good enough sense of it. No, you say, which is true. Things change. They get better, or they get worse, and either way they change. When does it get better? When the war ends, maybe. When next year's harvest is better than this one. A pause. When we've done enough work. When we know enough. He looks at you to see if this is the honest answer or the answer for children. He's old enough to need the honest answer. Both, you say. He accepts this. Looks back at the valley. A hawk is working the common behind you, its shape moving against the pale sky with that specific quality of effortless precision. Every movement, every correction, the slight tilt of a wing, that makes it seem like it's not working hard at all, when in fact it is doing the most demanding thing it knows how to do. You watch it for a while. The acorns take 3 days. You crack them on Monday morning, a small mallet, the table, the repetitive knock and pry of opening the shell to get at the meat inside. John helps by redistributing already cracked acorns to places you haven't put them, which is help in the loosest sense. The meat goes into a bowl with cold water. You leave it overnight. Tuesday morning you drain the brown water. You can see the tannins in it, the water the colour of strong tea, and add fresh. Leave it again. Wednesday morning, taste. Still slightly bitter. One more day. Thursday morning, taste again. Almost nothing. A faint earthiness, a starch taste, clean. You drain the water for the last time, spread the acorn meat on a cloth near the fire to dry. This takes most of the day, turning it periodically, feeling for the moment when it stops feeling damp and starts feeling dry and slightly brittle. Then you grind it. Your grinding stone is old, a flat stone with a slight hollow worn in it by decades of use, with a round-bottomed stone for the grinding itself. It's slow work. Your arms get tired. You hand it to William when your shoulders ache, and he grinds for 10 minutes before his arms get tired, and then you take it back. The flour that comes off the stone is grey-brown and smells of autumn. You mix it half and half with your gleaned wheat flour. The acorn flour doesn't have gluten, won't rise like bread, needs the wheat to give it structure. But a half and half loaf, dense and dark and with a faint nuttiness, is bread. It is calories. It is 2 extra days that weren't there before. Nan, when you show her the first loaf, breaks off a piece and eats it critically. "Better than last time," she says. "You made her watch you make it. The first batch 2 weeks ago, so she could correct your mistakes. The first loaf was too dense and slightly gummy. You hadn't dried the acorn meat enough. This one is better." "My mother made it better," she says. "Your mother had 20 more years." 25, probably. "Pass it here." She takes another piece. This is how knowledge moves. Nan watches you, corrects you, eats a piece of the result, gives it a grudging pass. You will tell your daughter, if you have a daughter after Bess, or you will tell Bess when she's old enough. The knowledge moves forward the same way it moved backward, person to person, in kitchens, in fields, in the slow accumulation of better and better performances. In November the rules shift. The gleaning is done. The fields are stripped and turned and the livestock are off them. The mushrooms are finished, the hedgerows are stripped or frozen, the rosehips are jars on your shelf, the acorn flour is in a cloth bag. What November gives you instead? Wood. Dead wood only. You don't cut living trees, and not only because it's not yours to cut. Living wood doesn't burn well, but fallen branches, dead wood on the ground, wood that the storm last week brought down from the upper edge of the copse. This is yours to take. Technically, everyone's to take. You and William spend 2 Saturday mornings gathering wood. You bring it home in armloads, stack it against the south wall where the cottage gives it some shelter from rain. You're building a winter store of fuel. Not enough. You never have enough, but more than nothing. The other November resource is gleaning of a different kind. Cabbage leaves. The kitchen gardens at the bigger houses, when the cabbage crop is finished for the year, are left with stripped outer leaves on the ground. Tough, dark green outer leaves that the kitchen wouldn't serve, but that you can cook down into something that has substance and, more importantly, has the same quality as rosehips. It keeps the children from getting the pale, thin sickness that comes from eating nothing but bread all winter. The kitchen garden at the rectory, Reverend Warren's wife is a practical woman, as established, leaves a note for you twice in November. The garden is cleared, Mrs. Giles, if you'd like the leavings. You go with your basket and take what's there and say thank you to no one in particular. The kitchen garden at Bellamy's farmhouse is different. The housekeeper there, Mrs. Croft, has opinions about charity that are more complicated. She'll give you things, but she wants the exchange acknowledged in a specific way. You're to come to the back door, and you're to wait, and you're to say please, and accept whatever she decides to give you with the correct expression, which is gratitude without too much of it, because too much gratitude makes her uncomfortable. You do this exactly twice in November. The first time she gives you a large amount of winter kale and a somewhat patronising speech about industry and the importance of women of good character. The second time she gives you a smaller amount of kale and no speech, which is better. The third time you don't go. You go instead to a woman called Agnes Hyde, who lives in the last cottage before the edge of the village and who has a pig and a half-acre plot, and you make a deal. You help her with her pig slaughter in exchange for the organ meats. The organs, liver, heart, kidneys, are the bits that won't keep, and she has more than her family needs, and you have 3 children who need the iron and protein in them. The pig slaughter is unpleasant. You've done it before, but unpleasant things don't become pleasant through repetition. They become manageable. You come home with a cloth bag of liver and 1 kidney and a length of intestine that you will clean and stuff and call sausage, and William looks at the bag with the expression of someone who's very hungry and is trying not to ask what it is. It's food, you say. Don't ask. He doesn't ask. He has learned this particular lesson, which is roughly, in a kitchen that's doing its best, the cook's judgment about what goes in the pot supersedes the diner's preferences. You should say something about what this costs you, not the money, which is measurable. The other cost. Your hands by November are a specific texture, not just rough, not just the general roughness of outdoor labour, but the texture of constant wet work. The rosehip processing, the acorn soaking, the laundering that can't stop just because it's cold, the daily bucket haul from the well. The skin between your fingers is cracked in 3 places that won't heal properly until spring. You pack them with a mix of tallow and the dried powdered comfrey that Nan grows, and they get slightly better and then crack again in the cold air. Your lower back, from the gleaning and the carrying and the hours bent over the processing table, has its own opinions about all of this. The opinions are expressed in a dull, persistent language that begins when you get up in the morning and quiets only when you are fully horizontal at night. Your feet. By November, your shoes have been resoled once this year and needed again. You're managing this by walking differently, avoiding the worst of the mud, taking the edges of paths where the ground is harder, wearing through the sole unevenly by compensating. You're also managing it by not thinking about it too specifically, which is its own kind of skill. Sleep is not what it should be. The cold interrupts it, not waking fully, just surfacing, checking that the fire hasn't gone all the way out, listening for John pulling the blanket tighter. You are never fully rested. You've forgotten what fully rested feels like. This is not sustainable indefinitely, but it is sustainable for now, and now is all you're navigating. You don't tell the children any of this. You tell them, good morning. You tell them, here's your breakfast. You tell them, go to sleep. The wall between them and what you know is your first job, and you keep it maintained. The way you maintain the fire and the stores and the careful calculation of what remains and what's needed. But in the evenings, after they're asleep, when the fire is low and the cottage is as quiet as it gets, the pig breathing in the corner, the distant sound of the village settling into night, the occasional creak of the house adjusting to the cold, you sit by the fire and you let yourself know what you know, that this is hard, that you are tired, that the uncertainty about Thomas is a specific weight that sits on your chest at these moments when there's nothing else to think about, when the day's calculations are done and the children are fed and the fire is all right, and there's nothing left to do but feel what you actually feel. You're 27. You have 3 children, the youngest not yet 2. Your husband is in a war. The harvest failed. The bread is too expensive. The common land is disappearing. The whole elaborate system of customary rites and practical knowledge that you have been learning more of every week this autumn exists because women in situations like yours have needed it for centuries, which means women in situations like yours have been in situations like yours for centuries, which is not exactly a comfort. But it is a company of sorts. The woman who taught Nan's mother to leach acorns, the woman who marked which hedgerow berries kill and which ones heal. The woman who first watched a baker in a market town and decided that standing there in front of him and saying this is too expensive was worth the risk. All those women, gone now, but the knowledge they carried still here. Passed forward in kitchens, in fields, in patient demonstrations and grudging corrections. You're one link in that chain. You're passing it to Bess, who is 5 and will soon be old enough to come to the hedgerows with you and learn which berries are which by having them pressed into her small hand and identified. This is what survival looks like from the inside. Not dramatic, not a single heroic moment. A chain of small methods passed forward by women who understood that the knowledge itself was the thing worth protecting. It comes in December. William brings it from the road. A man on a horse had asked at the village for Thomas Giles's family and been directed to your cottage, and passed the letter down to William, who runs it home with both hands as though it might escape. The letter is from the regimental chaplain. You know, before you open it, the 2 possibilities. You have known them since September. You have been living between them, performing the ordinary daily work of survival with those 2 possibilities always at the edge of your awareness. You send William and Bess to Nan's house. You open it. Thomas Giles, wounded at Groningen November 3rd, wound to the right arm, infection following. Recovered. This word takes a moment to land, and when it lands you have to sit down. Currently recovering at a regimental hospital in Middelburg. Expected to return to England in the spring if the wound continues to heal. Respectful regards. You sit at the table. John, who has been watching you with the unfocused observation of a 14-month-old, comes to stand beside your chair and presses his face against your leg with the small person's instinct for when contact is needed. You put your hand on his head. Spring. Expected in spring. Spring is not now. Spring is 4 months of winter between here and there, 4 months of the routines you've built, the flower and the rosehips and the mushrooms and the careful calculation, 4 months of being the wall between the children and what you know. But spring exists. Thomas exists, wounded and somewhere in Middelburg, but existing. The fire makes its small sounds. Outside, the village is going about its December afternoon. You fold the letter carefully and put it in the box on the shelf where you keep the things that matter. Then you go to get the children from Nan's house. December is, paradoxically, the month when the foraging work eases. This is because you've done it. The stores are made. The acorn flour is in its bag. The rosehip syrup is in its jar. The dried mushrooms are on their string. The kale is in the cold of the outhouse where the frost keeps it instead of rotting it. What December requires is management, not acquisition. The flour stretched further than you calculated, because the Reverend's wife gave you 2 more packages through the month, each time without ceremony, and because Nan appears at your door once a week with something. A piece of hard cheese, a handful of dried beans, what appears to be an entire cured fish, unexplained, and leaves it on the table and talks about something else. You begin to understand this is what survival in a village means, at the scale of the village rather than the individual household. It is a network of informal debts and gifts and obligations that are never quite named, never fully formalized, but that function as a kind of insurance. You give when you can, you receive when you must. The ledger is never fully settled, but it doesn't have to be. It just has to keep moving. On the days when you don't have to forage, you sew. You are a competent seamstress. Not excellent, but competent. And there is work to be had. Mending work for the houses that can afford to pay to have it done. 2 shillings for a day of mending is not a lot. But 2 shillings is 2 shillings. William can read. This is Thomas's doing. He wanted his children to read, spent evenings when you were first married teaching William by firelight with a hornbook, patient in a way he was not always patient about other things. William can read and is now teaching Bess, and Bess is 4 letters in with considerable stubbornness in both directions. Reverend Warren has a small school on Tuesdays. You send William because William going to school is William not going somewhere he might get into trouble, and because an 8-year-old who can read and calculate has a better set of options ahead of him than one who can't. The school costs nothing. Reverend Warren is that kind of reverend. On the Tuesday before Christmas, William comes home with a small painted card, the school made them, that says peace and goodwill in his own handwriting, slightly uneven, the letters from his own hand. He gives it to you with the expression of a child who has made something he's proud of. You put it on the shelf next to Thomas's letter. January in the Gloucestershire valleys in 1796 is cold in a way that is not abstract. The cold here, in a cottage with thin walls and a fire that you cannot afford to burn as hot as you'd like, is a constant physical presence. It's in the floor under your feet when you wake before the fire is lit. It's in the water in the basin, which has a skim of ice on it every morning now. It's in the blankets that never quite feel warm enough. The baby is the calculation that wakes you at 3 in the morning. John, 14 months old in October, is 16 months old now. He's sturdy. He is stubbornly, almost defiantly sturdy, which you regard as the greatest personal achievement of your life. But cold nights are not good for small children who can't regulate their own temperature and who rely on the warmth of the bodies around them. You sleep with John between you and William, which is not the arrangement anyone would choose for comfort, but which is the arrangement that keeps the baby warm. Bess on the other side of William, all 4 of you packed under every blanket you own, which is 2. In January you learn something about the rosehip syrup that your mother tried to tell you, but that you understand better now from the evidence in front of you. The children who get a spoonful every morning are different children than they were in December. More energy, less of the pale, listless quality that poverty and cold produce. John, who has been getting a half spoonful every day, is not sick. William and Bess are not sick. The syrup runs out at the end of January. This is where the forward planning meets the gap. You didn't make enough. You thought you made enough. You didn't. You go back to the hedgerow. In January the rosehips are still there, frostbitten, soft, collapsing, but still there, still rich in what your children need. You pick them with hands so cold they lose sensation after 10 minutes, fill your basket, bring them home, make a numb batch of syrup with the last of your honey. Your hands hurt for 2 days. The syrup keeps the children well. There's a rule that Nan told you at the very beginning, in October, before the first gleaning expedition, that you have come to understand more fully with each passing month. She said, "You don't have to do all of this perfectly. You just have to do most of it well enough." At the time, you thought this was a comfort offered to a nervous beginner. You've spent the winter learning it's something different. Perfection, the perfectly calculated stores, the exactly right amount of flour, the precisely calibrated rosehip syrup, is not available to you. Too many variables. The gamekeeper's schedule changes. The weather destroys a mushroom run. The baby needs more than you planned. What keeps you alive is not perfection but redundancy. Multiple strategies, multiple sources, gleaned wheat and acorn flour and mushrooms and hedgerow berries and sewing work, and Nan's weekly appearances and Reverend Warren's wrapped packages. No single one of these is sufficient. Together they constitute a system that has so far not failed. The women who fail, and they do fail, you've seen it, families that end up in the workhouse by February, are often not the ones with the worst circumstances. Sometimes they're the ones who had one strategy and trusted it completely. The ones who gleaned but didn't forage. The ones who foraged but didn't build the network. The ones who were too proud to receive Nan's fish and too careful to accept the Reverend's flour. Single points of failure in a system that does not forgive failure. You spend February building the redundancies, another source of mushrooms that Nan shows you in a different location, a third source of firewood, a stand of dead elms on the far side of the common that no one else seems to have noticed. A new contact, Agnes Pond's daughter, who works in a kitchen at a big house in Stroud, and who occasionally has excess from the kitchen that can't be used. Old vegetables, bread the household won't eat, the occasional piece of cheese, that she passes along to women she knows are struggling. Each new source is a new strand in the web, and the web holds. February, near the end of it. The days are getting longer. Not dramatically, not yet, but you can feel it in the way the light holds a few extra minutes in the afternoon. The children are asleep. The fire is low but alive. You've gotten good at reading exactly how much fuel it needs to last until morning, the precise combination of large log and small wood that gives it persistence through the cold hours. You've gotten good at a lot of things this winter. You sit by the fire with Nan's mending that she passed you this afternoon. The needle moves automatically, your hands knowing their work. The cottage is quiet except for the fire, except for the sound of the children breathing, except for Susan in her corner, making the small, satisfied sounds that pigs make in the night. On the shelf, Thomas's letter, the painted card, the small jar of rosehip syrup, 1 spoonful left. In the flour bag, about 4 pounds, enough for another week. In the acorn flour, enough for 5 days. In the pot, soaking for tomorrow, dried mushrooms and the last of the dried peas. Outside, fields starting to soften, the first week of February mild enough that you went to the south. Common yesterday and found, under the dead grass, the green tips of what will be young nettles in 3 weeks. You know what to do with nettles. You know 17 things to do with nettles. Spring is coming. This is not a hope anymore. It's a calendar fact. Spring comes after winter with the reliability of physics. The harvest is months away, the real harvest, the wheat harvest, the one that will reset all the calculations. But spring itself, the nettles, the new growth, the birds coming back, the longer days that mean longer gleaning, the roads drying enough to make the walk to Stroud bearable again. Spring is already beginning. Thomas's letter said spring too. You let yourself believe both springs at once. There is a thing that happens sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, when the work is done and the children are asleep. You think about the women who did this before you, not your mother, not Nan, further back than that. The women in this valley who faced harvest that failed in bad years, who watched enclosures take things they'd always had, who walked the same hedgerows and knew the same berry calendars. Some of them walked the Cosley Field's predecessor field, different shape, different ownership, different name, same ground, and gleaned grain with the same method, the same fold of the apron, the same performance of casual gathering. They knew the same oak tree, different acorns, but the same tree, the same leaching process, the same 3 days of changed water, the same test for bitterness. They made the same calculation. What I have, what I need, what is possible. They ran that number while sitting by fires in rooms not so different from this one, with children sleeping not so differently, with absent husbands or dead ones or present ones who drank, with the same aching backs and cracked hands and the same profound fatigue of living at the exact boundary of enough. You are not special. You are not unusually strong. You are part of a long practice of ordinary, extraordinary competence that nobody writes down, because it belongs to people for whom no one keeps records, no history of gleaning methods, no treatise on the management of rosehip syrup. Through the winter of 1795, just women talking, women watching, women teaching daughters and neighbours and anyone who would pay attention. The knowledge does not live in books. It lives in the fold of an apron, in the set of a woman's back over a threshing floor, in the way Nan's hands moved through a hawthorn hedge without drawing blood. It lives in you now. You are the knowledge. You are its current address. In 100 years the valley will be different. The mills that dot the riverbed now will be bigger, louder, and then later silent and empty. The roads will be hard and smooth. The common land will be mostly gone. People in this valley will buy bread from shops and not know its grain's history or worry about the price of a loaf in the same immediate physical 3 days from here way that you worry about it now. They will not need to know what you know. Most of them. March comes. The morning you decide it is finally spring is the morning you walk out to the South Common and find the nettles properly up. Not tips, not maybe, but real young nettles, the bright green kind, with the fine stinging hairs just forming. You pick them with your apron over your hands and bring them back to the cottage and cook them down with a little salt and the remains of this week's stock. And the colour they turn, the water is the most optimistic thing you've seen in months. Green. Like the world remembers how to be green. You give William and Bess bowls of it. Bess makes a face. It's green, she says. It is. Why is it green? Because spring, you say, which is not a complete answer, but she accepts it. That evening you write a letter to Thomas. It takes you a long time because writing is slow for you, and because there are several things you want to say that are difficult to say in writing, that are things you only know how to say out loud while looking at someone. What you write is this: we are well. The children are well, and it is now spring here. John is walking properly now and says 5 words with regularity, and would very much like to meet his father. William has been a good boy. There's plenty to tell when you are home. I have learned many things this winter. I hope your arm is better. I hope you're coming back. We are ready for you. All of us are ready. You seal it with the small bit of wax Nan gave you for this purpose. You give it to William in the morning. Give it to the carrier, you say, and come straight back. He takes it like it's fragile. Your eyes are heavy. The candle has been low for a while and you've let it burn. You'll sleep soon, and the candle is nearly done. No use in saving an inch of tallow. Outside the cottage, March is doing what March does. Cold still, with a wind. But the cold is different now. Has water in it rather than stone. The kind of cold that is about to become something else. The children are asleep, all 3 of them. John in his corner with his blanket pulled up to his ears, breathing the small, reliable breath of sleeping children. Bess curled like a question mark, always has slept this way, as far back as you can remember. William straight and still, the way his father sleeps. Susan the pig is having a dream. Her feet move slightly. You've always been curious about what pigs dream about. The flour bag, enough for a week. New growth starting on the common. The rosehip jar is empty, but that's all right. The rosehips are done now. What they were needed for is done. The children are well. You're tired. You're always tired. The tiredness is so familiar at this point that it has become a kind of companion, something you know the shape of. But underneath the tiredness, or inside it, something else. Something that doesn't have an easy name. You survived. Not heroically. Not with drama. Not in a single moment that will be remembered. You survived in the only way surviving usually works, which is methodically, day by day, with a fold of an apron and a jar of rosehips and a woman named Nan who's been doing this for 30 years, and a wooden bowl that you have scraped empty and filled again and scraped empty and filled again, all winter long. You made it to spring. Your children made it to spring. That's enough. That is genuinely, completely enough. Centuries will pass. The fields around this valley will change past recognition. The hedgerows will mostly be grubbed out, the birds that live in them declining one species at a time, into something people in the future will describe as sad but will treat as normal. The common lands will be gone, the last of them, the hills themselves privately owned. The mills will close. The village will become a commuter village, which is a thing you don't have a word for. Nobody will glean. Nobody will need to glean. Nobody in your village's future will walk a harvested field with a folded apron, looking for individual ears of wheat, performing casual randomness for a gamekeeper's benefit. The machinery will change. The entire relationship between people and the land that feeds them will change so thoroughly that the knowledge you carry, the specific, embodied, practical knowledge of how to find food in a landscape that is withholding it, will have no address anymore. It will be, in the truest sense, lost, but something else will remain. Not the techniques, not the specific berry calendar, or the acorn leaching method, or the correct way to strain a rosehip. Something under all of that. The knowledge that the body can manage more than it thinks it can, in the cold, in the hungry months. That there is almost always something in a hedgerow if you know how to look. That doing the thing in front of you, the small, practical, immediate thing, is almost always better than being overwhelmed by the size of the whole problem. That the people who survive are usually the people who kept doing the next thing. That a bowl full of nettle soup and a child asleep by a fire in March, when you thought you might not make it to March, that is the world working exactly as well as it needs to. That's enough. It is always, just barely, enough. You blow out the candle. The room goes dark, and in the dark the fire's low light becomes the only light. A slow orange pulse from the banked coals, enough to see the children by. John, Bess, William. All right. Your body knows what it needs now. It's been telling you for an hour, and you've been ignoring it in favour of the letter and the candle and the sitting. Now you let yourself listen. You move to the pallet and lie down with the practised economy of a person who does this every night in a space that doesn't have room for ceremony. The blanket, the position that puts the ache in your back at its most neutral angle, your hands flat on the straw, ticking. Outside, the wind moves through the March trees, through the elm that lives against the east wall of the cottage and that scraped its branches against the wall, all winter, all night. A small rhythm you stopped hearing after the first week, but that is there, has been there, is part of what sleeping here sounds like. Somewhere in the village a dog barks once and stops. The pig settles, your breathing slows. The weeks of winter are behind you. The calculations done, the stores made and used and remade, the fields gleaned, the hedges worked, the acorns soaked, the mushrooms dried, the Tuesday road to market walked and walked again, the child's painted card on the shelf, the letter from Flanders in its box, the letter to Flanders on its way, all of it behind you. Ahead, the nettles coming up on the South Common, the roads drying, spring arriving with its particular vivid promise, the long light of April mornings when you can see to work early, when the world opens up and the calculation has a different shape. Thomas coming home. Maybe. If the arm heals, if the war allows, if. But tonight, warm enough, fed enough, safe enough, the children breathing, the fire alive, you still here on the other side of a winter that wanted to take more than it got. That's something. That's quite a lot, actually. More than a lot of people have. You know this now in a way you didn't a year ago. It is enough to sleep on. It is more than enough. Let the darkness take you. Let the sound of the wind in the elm tree be the last thing you hear, because it was the first thing you heard when you moved here, and it will be there tomorrow. And the wind doesn't know about the harvest failure or the bread price or the war. The wind is just wind, old as everything, and indifferent and moving through March like it always has, like it will. Let your hands unclench. They've held enough today. They can let go now. You're breathing in and out, in and out. The village is quiet. The fire settles. You close your eyes, and there is nothing left to calculate. Good night.